please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
The flag of the United States of America.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Gorski, could we have roll call, please?
Mrs. Koloponowicz,
Here.
let it be noted that Mrs. Koloponowicz is participating via teleconference.
Thank you.
Mr. Chiarella?
Here.
Ms. Antelis? Mr. Braverman?
Present.
Mr. Kaufman?
Here.
Mr. Klein?
Here.
Mr. Leary?
Here.
Mr. Masters?
Here.
Mr. Tesler?
Here.
Mrs. Ferroni?
Here.
Mr. Acting Board President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. In accordance with the provisions of the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law, the Monroe Township Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted August 11, 2012, number 1 at all schools, number 2 at the Home News and Tribune, number 3 at Asbury Park Press, and number 4 filed with the clerk of the municipality. Now I'm going to move on to number 5 and open it up to the public forum for anything that is on this
I have
agenda.
a point of order.
Sir.
A few years ago, when we developed a policy for using the phone for people that couldn't get to the meetings, at that time we used it quite a few times. Since then, I thought there was a ruling from the Attorney General's office that it couldn't be used unless the individual is sick or there was some kind of an emergency. Now, can somebody clear that up for me?
You want to take it?
May I take it? Sure. Mr. Braverman, Dr. Hamilton solicited advice from Board Attorney on that matter, and she has replied in a format that went home to the board members' weekly confidential on Friday, indicating that it was allowable per the statute for a board member to participate in a board meeting via teleconference and also to vote.
Correction, that writing did not go home. Board Attorney will be here this evening. She'll discuss that in greater detail. She did give a written opinion, but asked that she be allowed to articulate that opinion in the closed session this evening.
I would like to see a copy of the statute and her written opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Braverman. I'd like to move on to the public forum, just on anything that anyone has related to this agenda. Well, seeing none, we'll move on to number 6, which is a review of courtesy busing and the feasibility study. Mr. Gorski, can you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Last week, at the board subcommittee, finance committee level, Dr. Hamilton and I presented a feasibility study where we reviewed the 2012 through 2013 budget revenues to make sure that the revenues were properly matching what was budgeted and that there were no overestimated revenues actualizing that could be provided for this $80,000 transportation question. And we also reviewed the appropriations in the 2012-2013 budget to make sure that there were no appropriations that were overestimated that could be leaving an available balance that could be transferred to the same cause of the 430 bus reinstatement. As we provided to the committee, there were no revenues above what was estimated in the budget, and there were no appropriations that were overestimated, leaving an available balance to be transferred to the 430 bus issue. You may recall that as part of the budget process, there was a great refinement of the budget nearing the end, where all of the appropriations in the budget had to be defended in a defense round by the schools and met the board goals and therefore remained in the budget. And they were carefully matched to the revenues, creating a balanced budget. So the only way that the 430 busing could be instated was to remove otherwise budgeted appropriations from the 12-13 budget and that would thus cause hardship in some other area. I believe I'm reflecting the notes from the committee when it was decided that it was unanimous that the committee decided to not consider removing any 12-13 appropriations and leave the budget as is, with the resolution that passed at the last board meeting, creating the supervision centers at the middle school and the high school. One final note, that it was discussed and recommended by the committee that in the 13-14 budget process, which begins in October, that one of the items that be considered would be the 4:30 bus run on a subscription service, meaning that the cost of the run would be shared to the parents. The board would work collaboratively with the parents, with administration, to intelligently design a method to provide the service if it makes it past the board at that time.
Any questions or comments by the board?
I think you can summarize this as that we have no slack in this budget. It's a zero-sum game. If you want something now, you're gonna have to take it from some other place. So you're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
If I remember in our discussion, I don't know whether we're going to do it now or we're going to do it in the next budget session. For the students who are on sports teams and clubs, where we did discuss possibly charging for bus service, late bus service. Is that still in discussion, or is that something we put off until the next budget?
The Finance Committee, as I mentioned, decided not to consider that at this time, but would recommend it for the 13-14 budget process, which begins in October, November. That would be one of the first items discussed for possible inclusion in the 13-14 budget, whereas a collaborative effort with the parents and with administration would hopefully produce a subscription bus service that would satisfy parents' needs and also the fiscal needs within the budget. And that assumes that it has support by the board at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Gorski, can you elaborate on some of the other issues that you were looking at, removing, if we had to put this back in? Some of the other programs? Not all of them, but if you have an example.
Yes, previously submitted to the board in 2011-2012, where we were facing an unknown cut from the municipality. Dr. Hamilton and I presented to the Finance Committee and the board a schedule of 3 different phases of potential cuts. The first phase was not very severe in nature, and the severity of the cuts increased in Phase 2 and Phase 3, along with the dollar amounts of the appropriations. Some of the Phase 1 cuts that were shared with the Finance Committee for their consideration, if they wanted to bring back the 430 run, were items such as advanced placement testing supplies, some of the last added sports teams such as lacrosse, and other courtesy busing where the district provides busing services to students who are not legally required to have such services, but whereas the district has determined the routes to be unsafe, and therefore we spend a great deal of money providing transportation services. These are not considered hazardous routes where they're defined by policy for us to mandatory pick them up. These are an extension of what we feel is safe. Those were some of the ones that I recall that were in the Phase 1 category.
So that would be those 2-mile bus routes?
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Anyone else? If not, we move on to number 7, the superintendent's report and recommendations.
Okay, Acting Board President and members of the Board of Education, it is recommended by the superintendent that personnel items A through N be moved by roll call vote. One modification to item I, and that is for the department coordinator for the science position. That position would need to be posted and refilled and filled at another time. So the report would be for A through N, modification to letter I, just removing the science department chair.
So moved.
Coordinator.
Second.
Mr. Braverman and Ms. Antelis.
Open for questions?
Yeah, well, all those in favor?
No, any questions first?
Discuss.
Just on I, is that new positions, or is this something that we do every year?
This is something we do every year.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Roll call.
Mr. Kaufman.
Yes. Say yes. Yes. You have to recuse yourself.
Recuse on
Letter M.
M.
Yes.
As in Mary. Recuse on M as in Mary.
Recuse on M, so noted. Mr. Klein.
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Mr. Masters. Mr. Tesler.
Yes.
Mrs. Ferroni.
Yes.
Ms. Antelis.
Yes.
Mr. Braverman.
Yes.
Mr. Chiarella.
Yes.
Mrs. Koloponowicz.
Yes.
Mr. Acting Board President, motion passes.
Mr. Acting Board President and members of the Board of Education, it is recommended by the Superintendent that Board action items A through E be moved by roll call vote.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Braverman, Mr. Tesler, and Ms. Antelis.
Any discussion? Comments, questions? Roll call.
Mr. Kaufman. Mr. Klein.
Yes.
Mr. Leary.
Yes.
Mr. Masters.
Yes.
Mr. Tesler.
Yes.
Mrs. Ferroni.
Yes.
Ms. Antelis.
Yes.
Mr. Braverman.
Yes.
Mr. Chiarella.
Yes,
Mrs. Koloponowicz.
Yes.
Mr. Acting Board President, motion passes.
thank you.
That concludes the Superintendent's report.
I will move on now to number 8, committee reports. Mr. Klein?
Okay, I was part of the Finance Committee, this last Finance Committee. A lot of what we discussed was handled by Mr. Gorski. But what I do want to bring up is something that was brought up by one of the members. In order for us to achieve adequacy, or should I say step down to adequacy, which is what is requested by the State Department of Education, we discussed making large reductions in expenditures during the next 3 years, not to affect the students. I want that up front. Anything we do is not to affect the students' education. But we're going to research and find out better ways of doing things, perhaps changing some of the curriculum, and just something that will be ongoing for the next 3 years. And try to control our spending and try to get the property taxes down. One of the members brought up a suggestion, and that was that we move band and chorus into a regular period as compared to 0 period. In this way, we don't need 0 period busing, and it'll be part of the school day. So that's under discussion. This we discussed, and that's basically it. The rest was covered by Mr. Gorski.
Thank you. Any other committee reports? No? Then I'll move on to number 9, other Board of Education business. Done? Okay. Then I'll move on to number 10, closed session resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Township of Monroe hereby moves into closed session in accordance with Sunshine Law, Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, NJSA 10.
You know what, if I may, since Mike, the board attorney is not here, you want to suggest we go on to public forum and then come back to closed session? Is that okay?
Fine with me.
Board Attorney is expected at 7:30.
Okay. Then we're gonna just have a change here. We're gonna move on to number 11, which is the public forum. And then I guess we'd have to open it up to a public forum again when we come back.
Yes.
Yes.
So anyone having anything not related to the agenda, I mean, it could be about the agenda or not related to the agenda, it's up to you. So if you have anything, please come forward, state your name and your address, and we're going to stick with the 3-minute rule, and Mr. Gorski's going to gatekeep the time.
Hi, Karen Raff, 44 El Dorado Way. It was my understanding you guys are not doing assistant principals for this school year, but you just hired one. What?
No, that position is in the budget. It's a replacement of someone who moved to another position.
Right.
So it is a replacement. It's not a new position. That
Okay.
is in the
I
budget.
thought all assistant principals were being eliminated for,
There was some discussion about that, but that was not a final decision. That was
Okay.
not finalized.
okay.
If I may, one of the things that we talked about, one of the reasons for that, is that what we wanted to do, our last couple of hires or promotions have come internally, you know, so
Right.
we've had a good bench strength, and we've had good qualified people that we've been able to bring up to the principal level. And with the growth of the district, and we keep, as you know from Oak Tree, we keep increasing our student population, that the thought process here was that if we kept a couple vice principals, we at least have that conduit. We at least have that way to build and train our own internal candidates so that we have that pool to choose from.
And they are shared.
Okay.
The few vice principals that we have at the
Right.
elementary level are shared with schools now.
Right, okay, just wanted to clarify, thank you.
Robert Roach, 18 Muirfield Boulevard, Monroe. I see here with there's a Devin Kaufman. I assume that's a relative. And it says new position. Is this person a new hire, or has he been on the roles previously?
This person has been on the rolls previously as one of our summer tech people, and this is a position that was in the 12-13 budget, and he was the successful candidate in that process.
You say he was in a prior position. When did he become a Board of Education employee?
He was hired in 2007, I believe, 2007, 2008.
Which was before Mr. Kaufman became on the board.
No, Mr. Kaufman was on the board, but the nepotism policy requires that if there is a district employee hired, if there is someone who is hired who is the member of a Board of Education member, they have to have been hired prior to the enactment of that policy. The policy was adopted in September of 2008. This individual wasn't our employee prior to that.
Okay. The videos of the council Board of Education meetings are on the website, but only the last meeting, from what I can find. Are the prior meetings on the website?
I'm not entirely sure of what the archival capacity is on the website. I'd have to ask one of the tech people that. But there has been some concern about our ability to maintain all of them on, and so there is a cycle by which we follow in terms of loading and removing old ones and adding new ones. But I don't want to give you the wrong information. I'm not sure what that cycle is.
I was searching today, and the only thing I found was the current one. Now, I may have not found the particular area that it's on, but maybe there could be another website that could house some of the past the meetings. Since the minutes of the meeting are not verbatim, they're just a transcript of an employee, and they may or may not be accurate. I think the public has a right to know what actually transpired during these meetings.
I'll look at that and give you a more intelligent answer, sir.
Okay.
Here.
One other issue is this meeting, which has been set up for probably since the last meeting, or at least a couple weeks, was not posted under the meeting section of the Board of Directors meetings or special meetings until today. And now I understand that it was on the front page. Someone told me tonight that it was on the front page down the bottom right. But I wonder why it would not be posted under the meeting section, like every other meeting.
I'm not sure that's completely accurate. Do you know
I can assure you it is, because I've been checking every day.
It should have been up if it wasn't, because it was certainly, do you know when it went up, Mike? I know the Personnel Committee agenda wasn't posted until today.
No, the agenda was posted before the notice of the meeting.
Gotcha.
The
It
meeting,
went up Friday?
being that it was a special meeting, it did not follow the usual chain of command for the posting and so on. It was on the high school bulletin board for much longer. I think that was up there for at least 10 days or 2 weeks. But there was a slip where it didn't make it to the website. And
Well, I look at the Board of Education website, and I go on look for the board meetings and special meetings, and it was not up in that top left-hand corner where you can drop down, and it wasn't on there. But I did stumble across it the other day where it had the agenda on, but no notice of the meeting. So I think that once a meeting is identified, I think the public has the right to know what it is, and I would think it should be posted on a timely basis. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Here's Vi.
Okay.
Anyone else from the public wishing to speak?
Evening. Lisa Weinthal, 10 McFarland Circle, Monroe. Just a couple questions regarding not just the Finance Committee vote, but the process that would be implemented under the last agreed-upon meeting that we had regarding courtesy busing and the temporary or Band-Aid formula that's in place. Can you give me a little detail about how that's going to work,
You mean regarding the supervised center?
specifically for the middle school?
Okay. What we're doing is we are preparing a posting that will go out that will identify the need for folks who would be approved by the board to supervise that center. Then we'll be meeting with the principal of the middle school, and she actually has already started thinking about this. And then we'll come up with a process to identify how children will be signed in, so we know who's in there, and how they will be signed out. The one thing that Mrs. Chanley has already indicated is that there will be a process where parents will need to come in and identify that they are signing, who they are signing out and who that person is. Of course, as the staff there becomes more familiar with the parents, it'll get smoother as the time goes on, but initially it's probably going to be a little cumbersome. We anticipate there may be as many as 300, 350 kids at the middle school who may need this service.
Well, actually, what Ms. Chanley had said during a meeting that Mr. Gorski had sponsored was if she redistributes the clubs from 6th to 6th, 7th, and 8th to individual days, it's not going to be 300 to 400. She said it's more likely a total number, so that's just clarification of that. Let me go back to the process for a second. So right now, in order for my daughter to be signed out, I have to sign, I don't know, however many people I think are going to pick her up on some form. How's that going to work?
You'll have a form that you will need to fill out, and whoever these people are, they will need to show identification, and they will match those forms. Those folks who are responsible for supervising the center will have to match the identification with the individuals on there.
What happens if they're not available, but my neighbor is?
You would have to make sure that the school knows who you are sending in their stead.
So let me understand this. I'm stuck in the Holland Tunnel. I can't get out. I can't communicate with anyone. I'm stuck. I know my neighbor's there. I'm able to text her, pick up my daughter.
I'm not sure I can give you the kind of answer you're looking for. But
I want
what
whatever answer you have.
The answer is that you would have to let us know, let the school know who you are sending instead of you. Otherwise, it would be a big concern to have someone that we don't know or that you haven't identified as someone you've given permission to pick your youngster up.
So if I can't get in touch with you in a timely way, 9 to 4, because I'm stuck in a place where I can't communicate, I'm on a plane, I travel a bit, my husband travels, what do they do at 5:15?
Generally what happens, and we do have instances where there are children who sometimes parents are in accidents or things of that sort. We make every effort, we contact, and if we are not able to reach someone, the principal either remains with the youngster or sometimes they come over to central office where the youngsters are supervised until someone is picked up. And
So
in some extreme cases, sometimes we have to take the kids to the police department.
Okay, so that's the fallback, to take them potentially via bus to some other place?
Correct.
Okay, some courtesy bus. I'm just looking for clarification, not trying to trick you up.
I take offense to that.
I don't even know what that means.
I'm just asking a question.
I can't answer that because I don't know what that means.
Okay. So then flash forward to the message that was left on our machines. There was some indication that there would be some committee formed to look at subscription busing, which I applaud, by the way. I'm glad the committee that idea finally resonated a germ, as opposed to what happened 6 months ago that we could have been planning. So going forward, though, what's the plan for that?
We'll establish those committees through the board structure. The board president has the opportunity, has the power to establish ad hoc committees, and once she gives that authorization to do so, we will reach out to the various buildings and put a committee together, and we will begin to look at what that courtesy, that pay to ride program will look like. We'll also do some research and see if there are other districts who are doing it as well, and look at what the procedures would be for how that would be paid, how much it would cost, how we would identify those youngsters who have paid, and what do we do for those youngsters who haven't, what the protocol will be. We've talked about some sort of identification card that youngsters, or designation on their ID card, that would show that they've paid.
So when would you anticipate that process starting? Because to be fair, you can't possibly have implemented it in 3 weeks. That was an unfair request to have done that if it was subscription, right? But now we are in August and your budget cycle starts September, October?
September, October.
So when would those committees be formed, and how, as a parent, how can I participate?
The committees will more than likely start as soon as we get direction from the full board, because that was just a committee discussion. The full board would need to authorize that process. And if the full board authorized that process when we started our budget reviews and preparation in most likely October, then we would begin that process and putting our committees together at that point.
Is there any reason not to start the process earlier? I mean, it's a review committee, it's a fact-finding committee, right?
Well, we just had the meeting last week, and it would have to go before this full board for consideration.
And who's making that motion? Is there a motion to do that?
There is no motion on the table to do that.
Oh, so this could theoretically drag on to October, November, December, theoretically?
Theoretically, I suppose it could.
And what would prompt the board to make that?
Somebody on the board making that motion to do that.
I understand. So then the process to join as a parent would be what? Do I submit an application, a resume?
No, you wouldn't need to do that. The building, generally, when we ask for parent participation, it's by way of the PTOs. But, the building principals would have some input in that process.
Okay, so I, as a general parent interested in being involved in general, can't participate, because if I'm not signed on to being, I don't understand.
I didn't say that. You can let your building principal know if you'd like to do that. If you're not actively engaged with the PTO, just let your building principal know when that committee is established that you'd like to be on it.
Okay, and are there going to be project milestones associated with this that are targeted?
We haven't processed the committee structure yet, or how that will work.
Okay, and how would we know about this? I mean, the last process, clearly, I know that there were efforts made to amend the current process by sending out that Global Connected Alert Now message. What would the process be to alert others via whatever mechanism you're going to use that it's going to start?
That the committee structure is going to start?
Yeah.
More than likely, we'll use Alert Now as well.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Shell Arminio, 9 Nathaniel Street. I know that part of an education is learning to, teaching people the rules and playing by the rules and being fair and deliberative about doing the right thing. So it is, and I'm not uncomfortable speaking usually, but it's uncomfortable because now I have to point out one thing that makes me uncomfortable. This has nothing to do with this nice young man, Devin Kaufman, but I think the new position, we have nepotism policies that should be taken very seriously in this community, and I know that there was a whole bunch of stories about how he was hired prior to the nepotism policy, but was he hired for this position prior to the nepotism policy?
No, he was not.
Was it a part-time position?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so that's skirting the intent of the nepotism policy. I think it is inappropriate to appoint this young man. I'm sorry for that. I don't mean to be pointing him out, but if we have a nepotism policy, we should have a nepotism policy. The board should not find ways around it. It's disrespectful to the public. It is, I think it's untoward to do, and I would object to creating a new position after the nepotism policy is in place. I would also ask, have there been other people that were interviewed for this position?
Yes, there were other people, and I want to go back to your earlier statement. We have vetted this process with board counsel, and we are clear that in this particular case, the decision is within the confines of the law and the nepotism policy adopted by the board.
Well,
The policy speaks to employees, someone who has been approved by the board prior to the adoption of the nepotism policy. This would be no different than someone who was a substitute in our district, for example, which is considered part-time or a non-permanent position. This young man was in a similar such position and therefore met the criteria as outlined in that adopted policy.
so that any board member who gets hired as a part-timer from now, any board member's family who gets hired as a part-timer from now on, or a substitute position, or any position that's not full-time, can ultimately work their way through under the confines of this law. Is that what you're saying?
If they were hired prior to 2008, they would be eligible for any full-time position that the board created after that time.
Well, I think while it may be legal, because you are the same people creating the policy that are benefiting by it. So while it may be legal, because that would seem you would have worked that out already, and of course the counsel that you pay for is going to tell you that it's fine. So I think, again, the intent of the policy is being diluted, and I think it's shameful and unethical that this kind of thing goes on. I don't care who it is. If you're a board member, the nepotism policy should be across the board. And again, I'm very, very sorry to this young man. He may be very qualified, but the policies are to protect the public from the abuse of power. And I would think that this is under the abuse of power, and again, it's unethical, and it just flies in the face of all of your proclamations about how wonderful that, and playing by the rules and keeping everything above board. This is going under the radar, and it is a bad precedent, and I'm really sorry that you feel that it's an appropriate thing to do.
Thank you.
Esther Gregory, 2 Kelly Court. It was mentioned at the last Board of Ed meeting about the water issue from Applegarth, that the building was closed for a year and a half due to workers that were there. I believe they had running water and bathroom use. So will the board be taking any recommendations from the Department of Environmental Protection on running their water? Because there is lead that is 20 parts per billion. Is there any recommendation that they're going to stand by?
Mr. Gorski.
Yes, Ms. Gregory, Dr. Hamilton and members of our staff met today with Dr. Richard Lynch to go over some of the commentary which we believe to be false that came up at the last public meeting. And I would just like to summarize today's meeting, if you'd bear with me.
Is that from Mr. Kolganiski from the department? That's
Yes,
from him?
Yes,
Okay.
he's also included
In
in the whole
there,
thing.
okay.
So just bear with me a moment.
Sure.
The Applegarth renovation project began after last school year, and the school's water system was completely closed. It was completely shut off so that the heating element in the school could be reduced, and with the water shut off, there would not be any breakages of pipes with things freezing over the winter. So on May 23rd, we took our initial water sample after turning on the main valve allowing water to flow into the school. Immediately upon turning on the water, this stagnant water was tested and sampled, and 12 locations within the building were tested. 5 locations exceeded the higher than 15 parts per billion that's allowable by the DEP. The next week, we attempted to run the water to get some of this stagnant, and in Dr. Lynch's words, sedimentary brown water out of the building's system. We encountered a blockage in one of the outgoing sanitary pipes and had to have Roto-Rooter remove the blockage. We still took sampling during this time. and the results tested at 3 locations higher than 15 parts per billion. Then on June 4th, after properly flushing the building, I'm sorry, that was June 4th when the 3 samples were high. On June 8th, after properly flushing the building and allowing the water to run and clear out this sedentary brown water,
Excuse me, is that May 23rd, 2012?
yes.
And when was the
Bear
asbestos
with me,
done?
please, let me finish. On
When was
June
the
8th
asbestos done?
On June 8th.
Excuse me,
on June
when was
8th,
the
all-
asbestos done?
If you would be polite enough to allow me to finish,
I
I
did
could
up until
properly
the-
address your question.
I did up until the point you said May 23rd,
Yes,
2012.
May 23rd, 2012.
So how long has the building been closed officially?
It was closed for over a year. I said that in my opening statement.
When was the asbestos done?
On June 8th, all the tested areas passed. No parts exceeded the higher than 15 parts per billion. Dr. Lynch stated that no further testing is required, no remediation actions are required. To go over the top, Mr. Tague replaced all the bubblers in the school. Bubbler is identified as a water fountain. All of those were replaced. They cosmetically look better. We're operating on township water, and again, all pass the DEP limits of 15 parts per billion.
I'm glad you're sharing it.
That's
When
for
was the
water.
last asbestos test done? Was it this year or last year?
The asbestos testing was done after the project was completed. It was tested by the DEP.
What year was that?
DEOSHA, 2012.
And since 2012 till May 23rd, the building has been closed? Nobody else has been working in that building?
All the-
Maintenance?
all of the as-
Custodian?
All of the asbestos has been removed from the building. There is no further testing required for asbestos.
Last Board
According
of
to
Ed
the
meeting,
authorities.
it was mentioned by the board that the building has been closed for a year and a half, and this is why this was coming up with the water issue. So there's now work being done, dirt being pulled up. Is that related to the pipes that you're looking into?
The work getting done is cosmetic. It has nothing at all to do with asbestos.
The ground work.
Nothing to do with asbestos.
I'm not asking if it's doing with asbestos. Does it have to do with the pipes that you're pulling up?
No.
No. What is the work that's being done?
Cosmetic landscaping is being done.
Digging up the dirt behind the basketball courts?
Yep. You may be referring to some of the soil sampling where we were testing for lead in the soil,
How far deep did you go?
as required by the officials doing the tests. They went, I don't recall exactly, this wasn't addressed today, but they
Okay.
went to a satisfactory amount that it was determined that there was no lead in the soil issues at all at Applegarth.
So there's no additional parking lot that you would be digging up back there? There's no other reason that you should be digging dirt
Not for
besides?
testing lead, no.
Okay. So when is the next Building and Grounds meeting? Because the last one was July 23rd. Do we have that date?
Doctor, do you recall when it was scheduled?
We have a conflict. It's actually scheduled right now for the 22nd, I believe, but we're gonna need to change that because we have to have a curriculum meeting at that. So
Okay.
that date will be sometime next week.
And then everybody could go back to the Buildings and Grounds and check your work, when there was work done, and you're claiming that the building has been closed for a year and a half. Officially, the water will not be closed. It will not be turned off, so you shouldn't have that reason. Look at the work that you've been doing for the year and a half.
The water has been on since May 23rd, 2012.
You just said that it was closed.
It was closed for the year preceding that when school let out, up until May 23rd, 2012.
Okay, thank you.
I think what she was referring to, because I live over there, there has been a lot of dirt being moved around in the back of the building, and maybe that's what she was referring to. I don't know what that's for.
Maybe the playground?
It's a lot of dirt.
There's landscaping going on, there's cement that's being poured in the front of the building.
This is in the back, though.
It's cosmetic. In the back of the building, it has to be for the playground.
Okay. And I have a question, too, about something you said. Just clarification, I'm confused. They opened up the water. You took 12 samples, right, of this dirty water.
May 23rd.
Only 5 had issues?
Yes, on May 23rd, in 12 locations in the building, strategically tested by Dr. Lynch, 5 locations tested higher than 15 parts per billion. On June 4th, after partially running the water, 3 samples tested high within the building.
Were they from the same location
No,
as the
different
five?
different locations. And on June 8th, once we had the sanitary blockage cleared, and we were allowed to remove this sedentary water that has sat in the building pipes for over a year, all 12 locations passed, below the 15 parts per billion, with no further testing being required by the DEP or recommended by Dr. Lynch. There is no issue with the water.
I'm a little confused. I'm Nancy Lamonaco. Mr. Kologinski?
Ma'am, could you please say your name and address?
Nancy Lamonaco, 45 Narrows Way, Monroe Township. Mr. Kologinski had emailed Chrissy Skirby, who could not be here tonight, saying that they were going to have to retest and have to replace water spouts and fountains throughout the building. Otherwise, you guys would be fined for that?
No, that's false.
And they were going to retest, leaving it closed for over the weekend and testing it again on Monday? So is this a bad email? Because this came right from him.
That's false.
If I can contact him, he'll tell me that it's a false email?
I spoke to Jerry Tigg, who he had conversations with and met with during the day. He made this impromptu visit. And when Mr. Tigg furnished him with the water testing results, he said, there's no issue here. The water tests are fine. But perhaps you could replace some of the bubblers in the building. And as I mentioned, Mr. Tigg went to the extreme of cosmetically changing all the bubblers or water fountains throughout the building. They look nicer now.
I don't
Mr.
care
Tigg and
about how
Dr.
they
Lynch's
look.
opinion, they have no bearing on the water because it's coming from the municipal.
So was the system flushed and then tested, or was it,
The
you know?
system was properly flushed by June 4th, and as I mentioned, all 12 locations within the building tested far below the 15 parts per billion.
and so now this email's coming in August from this man, Mr. Kologinski, from the Department of Health, and he's saying that we have to test again. Are we testing again, or we're done?
He did not make any demands that we have to test again.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chiarella,
Yes, sir.
I see something that needs to be corrected. We have citizens running to Trenton to get information, and Trenton shares it exclusively with them. That's ex parte proceedings. Trenton has the obligation to give all parties the information. We are being blindsided. We've had this happen before about 8 years ago when we were in the midst of trying to get this school building, and our attorney went down to Trenton and had a talk with the commissioner, and after that, all information would go to all parties. And I want to see that we start something in a very similar manner and quit this nonsense of ex parte information seeking.
Thank you, Mr. Leary.
Deirdre Wynn, 16 Brandon Avenue, Monroe. Okay, I don't know if I'm allowed to bring this up or not, busing. Okay, I just have 2 points to make. Zero busing, which is wonderful, but it seems to me parents are going to be home at that time to drop their children off at school versus picking their children up at 4:30. Most people have double, both parents are working nowadays to meet our new tax bills that we just received in the mail. Another thing, I don't want it to come down to where the seniors at high school are getting pressured by their friends. Come on, you can fit me in your car, just drive me home. My mom doesn't get home and I'm gonna have to walk, or I'm gonna have to sit here until 6 o'clock until she gets home. Then you're having high schoolers driving a bunch of kids home, which is not allowed. And we know what happens when a bunch of them get in a car. That's why this law was passed.
Mr. Gorski?
Yes. Ma'am, with regard to the zero-period transportation, that was actually eliminated from the 11-12 budget. It was only through an additional state aid award of about $887,000 that came late in July that was reinstated. It was clear at the time that that could only be a revenue source for 1 year and that it would be future eliminated again. So consequently, it was not in the 12-13 budget. And with regard to your second comment, the collaborative design of the supervision centers, both at the middle school and the high school, hopefully would alleviate any pressures from students having to drive home from someone who's not their safe choice to make it home?
A 17-year-old boy with 3 cute girls wanting to ride home. I mean, you know, you're not going to have somebody walking these children to a car saying, you have you and 1 passenger. 3rd person, go and sit on the curb and wait for your mom to come and get you. It's not going to happen. You have to be realistic.
They do that without busing. They don't need no busing to do, unfortunately.
I understand that, but don't you think it's going to be a greater thing now when you have all these sports, or these children aren't going to be able to play sports because they don't have a ride home? I think it's, I think there's other, and believe me, my children all went to Catholic grammar school. My kids wanted to be on sports. We had to drive. I drove half of the team. I purposely got a Suburban knowing that I could fit 8 children in my car and take them around because people were working. Unfortunately, I don't have that luxury anymore. I had to go back to work full-time. So now that my children are in high school, when you should be able to go back to work full-time, you can't, because now I'm going to have to be picking up my kids because I do not want my children sitting here. And I'm not saying unsupervised, but when you get kids that are released from practice, are done taking a test, their club is done, and they're just hanging around the school, that's when trouble happens. So I think that really has to be taken into consideration.
Thank you.
Hi, I apologize if I repeat anything because I was in the football meeting. So my name is Barbara Pascal, 253 Fernhead Avenue. Quick question, I know it came up about the middle school, the parents have to park and go in and sign their kid out. What about here? What's the process? Because I don't think that used to have to happen. We just showed up, the kid wandered out. Is that going to be the process at the high school?
Mr. Goodall and I have not completed the process for the high school, so I don't want to misinform you. I'm not sure of what protocols he thinks are best for that building, for this building.
Okay, because for example, right now, they walk out of practice and they just walk out and we are there and we pick them up, so.
Yeah, probably will be similar. I can't imagine that high schoolers would take kindly to having mom or dad have to come in and sign them out.
I know they wouldn't. Okay. Last month at the Board of Education meeting, I asked a question. I don't know if it was researched in looking at the financial aspect of courtesy busing. You also had brought up the fact that the county superintendent or someone from that office had suggested that liability reasons, we should not do it. And I was wondering, I suggested, is there a way to get a waiver to get around that issue? And I was wondering if that was looked into.
Yes, I want to make a point on that because there seems to be a misunderstanding to my point. The county business administrator's recommendation was not so much an insurance liability as it was a liability in safeguarding the children from an administrative standpoint. We have insurance on the children above and beyond what the parents' health insurance would provide. But the liability I was referring to is simply not knowing from an administrative standpoint who gets on the bus, who has got off the bus, where they got off the bus, etc. I got a call last year from a parent hysterical about their child not being home on time. And I dropped everything and called the bus driver on the bus phone and the microphone, and the bus driver said, I don't remember that child being on the bus. We had to go all the way back to trace it to their last period at school, where it was determined that they made other arrangements to get home with a friend or something. But it was a terrifying 45 minutes for everybody. That's what I'm referring to. You just don't know. And as the county executive business administrator, is a former school business administrator himself, and had these issues occur, that was his recommendation to eliminate it, because there's just no, like a regular bus route has a roster of students who are to be on there, and you know exactly where you're dropping them off. You don't have that with a late-run bus. You literally have kids yelling over the bus seat, "I'm next, I go on this street." And that's the problem we face.
Okay. I suspect that'll be the problem with the supervision area too, but I guess we'll see what happens. In regards to the comment that was just made about citizens going to Trenton, I think the point was that you guys weren't getting the same information that citizens were getting when they went to Trenton, not that you didn't want citizens to go to Trenton, because in fact, last month, we were strongly encouraged to go to Trenton, vehemently. So I hope that was the point, was actually that you guys get the same information that we do, not that we shouldn't be writing to Trenton.
I was using a term of art. I said ex parte proceedings. That means you're only giving it to one party in a dispute. All parties in a dispute should be treated equally and have equal treatment. And if it's only going to one party and other parties are isolated, that's unfair.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize we were in a dispute. I thought we were a partnership of parents and the board.
You and your friends are adversarial.
Mr. Leary, I'm sorry.
I think that, at least in my case, and in the case of most of my friends, that we speak very respectfully, and I take huge insult to that comment, and I think some of your friends do too.
I have a thick hide.
All right, Mr. Leary, thank you.
My last point, and this is a great segue, thank you, was that we were strongly encouraged, sort of, last month to be more involved. We're here to be more involved. Last month, for the first time, I came to a board meeting because I hadn't known about the busing issue, and I came and I spoke for the first time since I was like 13. Then, last month, during the board meeting, we get chastised for our lack of involvement. With all due respect, and perhaps this was not the intent of Dr. Hamilton's Global Connect message on Friday, or whatever day that was a couple days ago, we were given information that led many parents to assume that there was no point in coming because the issue was dead and that we should all just move on and wait for the process. I'm not, you look at me funny.
No, I'll respond to that.
Gotcha. 1 second, because he's showing me the clock. So my point is, it's all over the website. The school principals are telling us, the teachers are telling us, get involved with your kids' education. And that's what we're trying to do, and this is part of it. But comments like that, and comments like Mr. Klein's last month, and then I don't think this was your intent, but it led parents to assume that they didn't need to come, lead us to not want to participate. And you need to think about, what do you want? You either want it or you don't. And if you don't, then don't say you do.
The purpose of that voice message that sent out was not at all to discourage parents from coming out. I have no problem with parents. In fact, I enjoy respectful discourse. It's the disrespectful discourse that I'm concerned about. But the purpose of that message was to inform parents about the meeting that they had asked, that the board directed us to have in response to the parent concern. It was an effort to increase communication. So it was clearly misinterpreted, or the intent of that was misinterpreted. So it had every intent to be an effort to improve communication, keep parents apprised of the process, and the message never said don't come. The message started out by saying, for those of you who may not be able to attend the meeting, the special meeting, so I was also putting on your radar for those who may not have known about the special meeting that there was a meeting scheduled for this evening in response to the concerns raised by the parents. So I feel like this is a lose-lose situation when the effort was there to respond to parents. And I was made aware of the communication that was going on Facebook about the message and how the message was misinterpreted and how dare I try to discourage parents. That was never the intent.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to say on behalf of the board and administration, we very much value the community's input. We want to collaboratively serve you as best we can. This is your school district, and we want to tailor it to your needs. The way we can introduce you to that as best as possible to get involved with the budget is to look on the district website once the Board of Education approves the budget calendar. This is an essential document that has the complete timetable of the budget process, and it delineates everything from the very first committee meetings where some of these strategies like we discussed tonight about pay-to-participate busing are born, throughout the mandatory preliminary budget adoption to the final adoption. Keep in mind too, once a budget is finally adopted, that, administration has a directive to put it in place. To be discussing some of these topics like this in August, a month before school starts, is not really the most efficient or productive way to do it. So please, we welcome you to participate with us in the budget process this year. Join the Budget Steering Committee. Give us any input you can. Show us what you value, and we'll work with the resources we have to serve you best.
Great, you can count on it.
Good evening. It's Doug Boy, 4 Tamarack Road. I'm wondering, Mr. Gorski, if you could tell us what the cost of doing those water tests at the Applegarth School run.
Mr. Poy, I researched today the actual expenditures to environmental safety management who has performed the test so far. And I have the aggregate amount committed to memory, but I don't know the specifics for those individual tests that you're seeking. If you'd like to give me a call tomorrow, I'll be happy to pull those itemized bills out and go over those with you.
It's not so much that I'm interested in the particular cost. I just know from earlier comments this evening that you've talked about there's no surplus in the budget. There's no surplus in terms of appropriations nor revenue. But based on the comments and the concerns that I have heard from parents for the past several months about the safety of their children in the Applegarth School, I think that it might be prudent if the administration could somehow reassure the parents going forward with additional testing from time to time throughout the course of next year. I know it was said that Dr. Lynch indicated that there was no need for further testing, but I think that the parents would find themselves reassured if some additional testing were to occur once their children are in the building. So I simply offer that as a suggestion for the board or the administration to consider. There is a question for clarification on the agenda item N. There are quite a few staff members listed here that are being approved to provide assistance outside of normal work hours. Can you simply clarify what kind of assistance, what kind of work are they doing prior to the opening of the school year?
We have a pending legal matter involving challenges in the court with regard to special education. So there are specific artifacts that the attorney will need in order to present the attorneys will need in order to present their cases before the appropriate people, and there are some documents we need prior to the opening of school in order to meet the deadline the courts have set.
All right, so this relates to the special education program? Yes. Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Prerna Shah.
Just pull it down.
28 Magnolia Court. The budget was approved when for this year, in 2012, 2013?
End of March.
The preliminary budget was approved by the Board of Education on March 1st.
Okay. Now me...
Public hearing and approval of the preliminary budget.
Okay. My property taxes went up, I think, as did everyone else's. Did the school system get additional funding from that increase for the coming year?
Yes, to that specific question.
Not enough. 3.8.
The Board of Education recognized a $600 $178,000 increase in state aid after deductions from the prior year. That was applied within the budget. And the increase in the school taxes was 3.68% from the preceding year's tax levy.
For the 2012-2013
Yes,
tax year.
2011, 2012 compared to 2012-13.
Okay, so are we getting additional funding from the
Very
town?
slightly, and I'll emphasize insignificantly.
Really?
84% of the revenues are from local tax levy. We are grossly underfunded in state aid, and that is reflected in the local tax levy.
Okay. So the property tax we pay is considered not local? It's considered state also? I'm confused.
Your
with-
local property taxes are certainly local.
Okay.
It's fair to say that they would be decreased if the school district received its fair share of state aid funding, which you've heard a lot about if you've been watching the board meetings, probably for the last year and a half to 2 years. I would also like to add that the municipality has also received a cut in state aid funding, which has compounded the problem that you face in your tax bill because it's county, municipal, and school taxes. In addition to that, Dr. Hamilton and I were talking with municipal officials who defined that there has been, over the last 2 years, an extreme amount of tax appeals. About 1/3 of the assessed local property taxes have been appealed successfully, and that has caused an extreme burden on their tax rate.
$11.4 million.
Thank you.
Last year.
Okay.
And also, the entire rateable base has declined as a result of the economy. But there are some signs, as of recent from the municipality, that there's some green shoots appearing with regard to the ratables.
Can I add something to that? You asked about your property taxes. Roughly 65% goes to the Board of Ed. Then you have municipal taxes. Then you have county taxes. Then you have the fire district taxes. And, of course, library fees. And that makes up your property taxes.
Right.
What we get, and there's going to be a report probably within the next couple of weeks from the municipal government, that when you see the way we are underfunded versus our neighbor, Oldbridge, who's getting, they have 9,400 students, they're getting something like $45 million a year towards their schools, and we're getting now what?
Less than $3 million.
Less than $3 million for 5,900 students, which probably equates to under $500 a student versus $4,900 a student. That's where we're getting hurt. We took a cut here. The municipal government took a cut. How do you make it up? And then you lose $11.4 million
Through
in ratables. Your taxes went up, but you have kids in the schools.
Yeah.
The adults, the people over 55, my taxes went up in one shot, $900. I'm in an adult community. So I feel for you, but feel for me.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, but that's
I
what makes up
understand.
your property taxes.
Okay, I just didn't know if this increase was already taken into
Yeah.
the budget or if it was additional money. And how much
Get additional.
Okay, yeah. How much did the busing, after-school busing cost last year?
There was $450,000 of cuts to the transportation courtesy busing. That includes the zero-period busing and also the late-run busings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Pull it back up. Shani Henley, 8 Bridal Court. I wanted to ask, because it seems like this entire conversation about the busing had started with over-adequacy from the county. They were saying that we were over-adequate in what we were providing to students. So my question to you, and maybe you've already covered this, is what makes us over-adequate? I mean, obviously it's the budget. I know that the busing, you've talked about AP courses that we had too many. What else makes us over-adequate?
There are several things that go into that equation. Over adequacy has to do with those things that are provided that are above and beyond what the state refers to as thorough and efficient. It used to be called thorough and efficient, now it's this adequacy formula.
Okay.
So our middle school sports programs, for example, many of our high school sports and clubs that occur after school, that we pay teachers and stipends for and things of that sort. Although class size is not mandated, one could argue that if we increase class size, we would be able to reduce our number of teachers that we employ, for example, paraprofessionals. So there are a lot of things that go into that equation. What we spend on supplies and materials. One would say, well, you don't have to replace textbooks as often as you do. You don't have to have the amount of technology available that you do.
Right.
So these things get figured into those things that are defined as adequacy or thorough and efficient. So they're
Okay.
appropriate things.
Well, it kind of seems like those are the very things, though, that are starting to set our district apart from other districts around us.
You're absolutely right.
So it seems like we're at cross purposes because we're trying to move forward and become an elite school district, for lack of a better word, but yet we're pulling back on the things that are going to get us to that point. And my fear is that this year we're talking about busing, and I completely understand the challenges that you're facing with that. However, I'm also thinking about next year and what the topic is going to be then, because we're going to continue to be over adequate if we continue to move forward in the direction that I'm seeing from your administration and the goals that you have for us. So we're taking away really what's making us special at this point.
I think you raise a very good point, and it's an awkward balance that we work to create. In fact, one of the things that the Budget Task Force was tasked with was that very question. What do we want? What is our vision for Monroe? Because if we, on the one hand, we want to become the West Windsors and the Princetons of the world, and that requires that we think outside the box and be creative and offer our youngsters those things that will make us competitive with those districts. But the other side of the equation, we know that there's an enormous burden on the local taxpayer to support those initiatives.
Right.
So we have to decide as a community, what are the things we value? What are the things that are most important to us as a community? And then that becomes our driving force. But we cannot walk with one foot on one path and one foot on the other path and think we're going to reach excellence at the same time. It's not going to happen that way.
Right, but I would just want to say that I think that sports and clubs are really important to kids, especially at this age, because they're beginning to try to figure out who they are and what their interests are. And I'm afraid that with so many parents having problems, obviously, with this issue and maybe being afraid they're not going to be able to pick up their children, maybe those children won't be able to participate anymore, that we're taking that away from them, something that's really important during their formative years. So I'm hoping that, well, let me back up. We had talked last month about not knowing really what the fallout is going to be from this. What kind of financial incentive are we going to see from the county and the state for doing away with this courtesy busing? And you'd also mentioned that we really don't know when we're going to find that out. But when we do, is it possible that maybe this discussion can come back and we can see, well, you know what, maybe this wasn't worth it, and maybe this is important enough to our district that maybe we need to talk about this again?
I think that's a very valid point and certainly something that I would suggest the board consider.
Okay.
Mr. Chiarella.
Mr. Leary, we're going to hold all comments.
No, I'm just going to make one comment, and that's
Well,
it.
your last comment didn't go over too well, so we're going to hold
I'll-
off
This
for
is
now,
this
and
is
we're
a
gonna-
I'm okay
comment
with
that
Mr.
will,
Leary.
I
I'm
think,
fine with him.
aid our direction.
Mr. Leary, we're going to let the public have their say, and then we're
Fine.
going to move on. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you for your time.
Robert Roach, A-Team Muirfield. I've heard forever about the fact that we're not getting what we should be getting from the state as part of the revenue process. The state distributes 80% of what the state distributes is for equalization aid. Monroe Township gets zero in equalization aid. So either what you're saying, either that the equalization aid is not being properly computed, or that we don't deserve equalization aid. What is it? And which is it? Is it not being computed properly, or don't we deserve it? And can you explain what the equalization aid is? I know, Mike, I don't want to hit you with, because we've talked about that equalization aid.
The equalization aid is state aid that's based on students that are at risk and LEP students. Monroe has very little in that category. And Dr. Hamilton and the finance chair and our board attorney met with Yahtzee Thomas from the Department of Education, as well as other state officials, who defined that Monroe's lack of state aid is due to two important metrics. One is income per pupil, and the other one, more specifically, that's the problem, is property wealth per pupil. As you know, Monroe is unique and has 60% of the community residing in planned retirement communities. Some of them are new and have valuations up in the $400,000 range. These units don't submit any students to the school. So in the aggregate, it makes it appear like we're living in very expensive homes per pupil. And that's what's hurting our state aid allocation. We've pointed out this flaw in the formula till we're blue in the face, but we just can't seem to gain any traction on that matter.
Do you think that equalization aid will ever not be a factor in the distribution of the state aid?
Probably not.
Okay. Thank you.
And one last thing on that. The state of New Jersey distributes state aid to districts, and this was apparent in 2008 with the extreme cuts that were recognized on an as-need basis. Districts that are under adequacy and have needs for resources, needs for programs, need for adequacy are given more state aid. Districts that are above state aid, are above adequacy, are believed to be able to take care of themselves. And that's the philosophy that the state has shared with the distribution of funds.
Other than the Abbott district, right?
That's it. Yes. Am I allowed or no? Yes, no?
We're just going to
Okay.
keep moving on with the public forum. Thank you.
Eyes on the clock.
Do you want to?
Lara Libros Getz, 5 Scott Drive. I just have a question. If the state aid, well, not the state caps us at 2%, and where you said where budget is going is 3.68, how do you get around that without having to? What's the difference?
That's easy to answer. You're allowed to grow your tax levy 2% plus adjustments. The adjustments are for healthcare costs, pension costs, and enrollment growth. We took advantage of those to a slight degree, but the main reason is because the school district is on a split-year basis with the municipality. Our school year ends June 30th, so our tax rate is picking up half of last year's effect, which was higher than this current year, and that's why you're seeing an average of 3.68% increase. That seems higher, but it's got a lagging part from last year.
And then I heard at the last board meeting you saying that this year, with the new iPads that are being purchased, we're not going to see any increase in our budget this year because of the money you're getting back. But year 2 and year 3, you said $425,000. So how's that going to affect? Are you looking long-term towards the budget then? I mean, it's going to have a definite impact if we lost money and now we're going to. This year we don't seem to have the effect because you're not costing you anything this year. But in year 2 and 3, it's going up. What you said, 425,000 roughly.
Yes. What's important to note there, as Dr. Gorman pointed out, is that by putting out to bid the current units and entering into a 3-year lease purchase, it makes the future much more sustainable for this type of initiative. When you buy a unit like this from bond referendum money, it depreciates quickly, and a technology component like that probably will last 3, 4, 5 years. The lease purchase, which will fit in the general operating budget, again, as you correctly pointed out, not in the 13-14 budget, but in the 14-15, recognizes savings from the trade-in and sale of those units. So it continues the initiative, it continues the investment at the most efficient way deemed possible.
Okay, and they're looking to purchase them at the end of the year 3, or you don't? Is that been, you
Yes,
said lease purchase? So we're leasing them now to purchase them year 2 and year 3?
Yes.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. We would have to explore options on where we are as a Board of Education and where the initiative is continuing to go. It gives us an option, and that's the most important piece, to stay on top of the most current technology out there. So at the end of the second year or third year payment, then we would have an option to either enter into a new lease or possibly purchase.
Okay, thank you.
I see our board attorney is here. If I can get a board member to make a motion for closed session since she's on the clock.
Beg your pardon, who made the motion?
I'm going to read it.
I second it.
All right. I'm going to read the closed session resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of Monroe Township hereby moves into closed session in accordance with Sunshine Law, Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, NJSA 10:4-6 through 10:4-21 to discuss the following subjects: receive attorney advice regarding a complaint received from an employee, and to discuss counsel advice regarding BOE members participating in meetings via telephone. This discussion conducted in closed session can be disclosed to the public at such time as the matters have been resolved.
So moved.
I second it.
Do you want to let them know that there'll be an open session?
Yes, and that's a good point. We're going to have an open forum again after we come out of closed session so that you can ask questions and discuss. Thank you. All right.
Did we get the motion?
All in favor?
Make the motion. Make the motion. All opposed?
Klein and
Whatever.
Abstention?
Aye.
Thank you.
Kathy, I'm going to discontinue the phone call now, and I'll start again in closed session.
Pretty please.
Okay. We're going to resume our meeting, and we're going to go into public forum again to discuss any new issues or, and not to reiterate or rehash what we already talked about, if possible. Thank you.
The number you have dialed is not.
Beg your pardon, anyone? That's it, right? Oh, go ahead.
Kristen Leamaro, 101 Applegate. You talked about Facebook and how there was lots of rumors and whatnot going around Facebook. If we could clarify some of that, I'd really appreciate that, because there's a lot of people who have a lot of questions about a lot of things, and we'd like some of them clarified. That'd be really, if you could do that, I'd really appreciate it. Okay.
Okay, you're back. Beg your pardon.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay, continue.
Okay. Some of the issues are with the busing, of course, and not finding the money in the budget and all this stuff, and these are the questions that were going around. The Applegarth school repairs, the asbestos repairs, all that stuff. There was money budgeted for the asbestos remediation, all that different stuff. How about these new cosmetically nicer looking fountains? Was that budgeted? And like, where's the money for that coming from? Stuff like that, like, you know, the playground that they're putting in there now. Where's that money coming from? You know?
Yes, Mr. Gorski.
With regard to your specific questions, there was approximately $397,000 budgeted in the 11-12 budget for Applegarth asbestos remediation, lighting, and floor tiling. Because of the efficient manner that administration scheduled the asbestos remediation over the summer, we were able to make significant savings there, which we applied to other needs recommended by the Building Grounds Transportation Committee for Applegarth. Also, the district entered into a lease purchase for playground equipment and ceiling projection monitors used for instruction within Applegarth. The total of that lease purchase is approximately $300,000 and includes a copier for about $17,000 that's not involved with Applegarth. Those are the most noteworthy items that come to mind. Some of the other items, like you mentioned, probably have been handled through internal transfers.
Okay.
But I'd have to go back and research those to give you the exact answer, because there's a lot of little things that I just don't have.
You understand what I'm saying? I'm just saying, like, these things were, like, money was found for these things, quote unquote. Why can't we find money for other things like the busing?
The difference is with these items that I discussed, the asbestos remediation, lighting, the floor tiling, the expansion of that scope, the only money that was found there was through the savings on the asbestos, where we were able to knock off about $80,000 from the estimate for the work, because we did it over the summer. The district entered into a lease purchase for the playground equipment and the projection monitors, which is not going to be a obligation to the district until 13-14.
Okay.
So there, as far as, finding money, I can assure you that within this budget, there is no oasis of money to be found.
Okay. Thank you. Another question, another thing that was raised was, the board has not added to the budget the amount of money they plan to get as revenue for the daycare center. Is that added into the budget?
Oh, yeah.
The daycare center is a separate proprietary fund, and as such, the money could be transferred over into the general fund by the board, but it was recommended by the district attorney not to have that happen until a net income is established enough to, number one, pay back the loan, and number two, sustain the program. That probably won't happen until 2 or 3 years out.
Okay, so where did the money come from to build this Mecca?
It came from a loan from the general fund approved by the Board of Education.
Okay.
The building was already established. It was really just cosmetic painting, the signage,
A new playground?
playground.
The playground my kids played on was not nearly as nice as what the one that the educators or the staff's kids are gonna play at. Because that's what a little bothering me. I have 6 kids in the school system, and what they play on is not nearly as nice as what the staff's kids are gonna play on. That's just I was a little shocked to all of us parents. We were really upset about that.
Ma'am, what's noteworthy there is, again, it's a loan, and that's going to be paid back to the general fund, having no impact on the taxpayers through the profits of the program, which will be raised by revenues from the staff.
So it didn't touch anything to do with our kids' education funding?
It is
or
not
nothing?
projected to touch any budget tax money,
Okay.
public funds.
All right. There was a question about not renewing Sharon Biggs' contract, and her position was filled again. Is that what the thing was? Is that true?
Personnel Committee is looking at now reappointing someone to that position. That position has not been eliminated by the Board of Education.
Okay, is it, because that was a question that was coming up along the thing too. And another question was raises for the Board of Education members and stuff like that. Is that a necessary thing? That everyone has to get a raise every year? I know that was this.
You don't need to get paid.
No, the not board, district personnel, did they have to get raises every year? I mean, is that necessary? I mean, when we have things like extra busing and stuff coming out and.
That each individual contract that you're referring to in aggregate is specifically negotiated very hard over a long period of time, and there's give and takes from both sides there. So to look at a potential increase there, not seeing the offsetting give-backs from these organizations is truly unfair.
This is our general topics that were talked about by everybody. I'm trying to get clarification, so, it's, also, is it true that there are clothing allowances allowed for district members, that they get personal clothing allowances?
No, I bought the suit myself.
That's what, these are questions that are being raised by people that we'd like answers to.
Only certain maintenance staff we provide uniforms for because of the nature of the work that they're doing.
Okay, these are, like I said, questions that people just want answered. That was one of them. And,
Sorry, the 3 minutes is up.
oh, okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, Audra DePiero, 39 Lower Matchaponix. I know that we did this because of our lack of state funding, and we had to get rid of some over-adequacy items. So, like you spoke before, Dr. Hamilton, you said there's 2 paths. We can either start doing this or keep moving up like we've been doing. It looks to me like we did this year, and we probably won't get any more state funding just for one item. Is this what we're going to be doing next year and the year after? And if we do, and we do get more state funding back because of that, we're not going to be able to buy those things with that money anyways, though, right?
Well, the budget process is zero-based. So once we figure out what our state aid is going to be, what impact ratables have on the tax levy, then we can make appropriate decisions regarding what comes in and what comes out. There are some non-negotiables. You got to pay people.
Right.
You got to have benefits. There are some things that get built into the budget. Those are considered our fixed costs. And those things that are above and beyond that, like courtesy busing, like whatever other things may fit in that category, The board, through the Budget and Finance Committee and through the full board, by an action item, will have to make some decisions about what those things are. Could the board reinstate next year? Could the board say, well, you know what? We saw a decrease in the number of children who participated in these after-school programs as a result of the elimination of busing. Is that something we need to reconsider? Well,
Okay.
if the board adds back in X number of dollars to support that, in full or in part, then something else, again, assuming that there's an an imbalance between the state aid and what we put in the budget, then we'll have to make some other decisions. Next year, we may be here talking about something else. We could be
Right.
talking about lacrosse, or we could be talking about class size. It could be a number of things.
Exactly. And you know how we have the new rule, if it's below the 2%, we don't have to go to a public vote?
Correct.
But this was 3.6 more, or did I get that wrong?
The 3.68 that was discussed before was the increase in the tax levy. The budget that was put together was below the tax levy cap that was available by
Okay.
actually $1.5 million.
All right.
We could have used excess surplus and actually had a budget that was under the requirement of an election by adding up to $1.5 million.
Okay. I just, one more thing, though. If we still continue on this path and we keep cutting things, the over-adequacy, and they give us the state funding back, will we be able to bring back over-adequacy items with that money?
Yes,
We could.
yes,
But then the next year, they could probably pull it again because we're over-adequacy.
exactly.
All right, thank you.
But again, let me just clarify something. The over-adequacy issue is one that the state is not going to tell us you have to bring your budget under adequacy in one budget cycle. Based on the laws as I know and understand them today, that doesn't mean that there can't be some legislative action at another time. But that's not likely to happen like that. Generally, there's a plan in place over the course of several years that would look to bring the district down to an adequacy level.
Thank you.
Can I say something or am I not allowed? Yes? In response to that young lady, and the young lady who was here before, who I think left, it seems that Trenton, is that you in the back?
She's there.
Stand up? No, that's not her. No, I'm talking about the one in the green before. No, she was here earlier. But anyway, it seems that you would think that the State Department of Education would want every district to strive to give the best education, the more advanced education to every student, no matter what level they're at. If they're able to reach into AP courses, all the power to you. Give us more money, we're using the money properly. Instead, they want you to be average.
Of mediocrity.
Right? So it brings the poor-performing school districts up. They're the ones who are getting well over what they can spend, and as I've said 100 times, Newark, New Jersey, as of 2 years ago, received $800 million between the state and the federal government. We're here nitpicking busing that we should have. I've said that all along. Most of us said that all along. We can't afford it. It's as simple as that. That's the part that hurts. You have people up here want to do the best for you, want to do the best for the students. The bit about the 4:30 busing, it'll probably come back, but we have to, at this point, because of what's happened in taxes this year, we have to concentrate, and I hope that once I'm off the board, that the others will follow. Start to cut expenses, start to do away with things that we don't need, to use the money for what we need, and start to, as we're cutting back, allow property taxes to come down, or at least stabilize, without hurting the kids. And I truly believe, I'm not an educator, I'm a businessman. But I have no kids in this district, I have no grandchildren in this district, but I look at every one of your children as my children. I wouldn't want anything less for them than I expect for my grandchildren. I ask that you bend with us. We're getting blamed for things that we have no control over. The young lady who spoke earlier in the green, everything is our fault. When I said, and I said it from almost the day I started,
and I'll do it until January or December. I have asked the parents to get angry and write letters. The last meeting, a woman said, well, I didn't know about it, but if you went on the website, there was all the information as to who to send the letter to. Nobody did anything. I've asked here at least the last 3 months, how many people are angry enough that sent letters to Trenton? Chrissy Skirby did. No one else did. The woman who spoke up earlier, her own admission was the fact that the last meeting was the first meeting she ever came to. Where was she all these other meetings? Why don't we have 100 people here at every meeting? Tell us what we're doing wrong. Make suggestions. Nobody's here unless it's something that affects them after the fact. I'm not putting the blame on all of you. Get involved.
Thank you, Mr. Klein, for that very
That was
brief
pretty
comment.
good. Huh?
Anyone else from the public?
Acting executive.
Shani Henley, 8 Bridal Court
My
again.
feelings.
No, I'm not. Actually, I
Very
want to
sore.
address what you said, because I think you brought up something really important, is that districts like Newark and Camden, those are all Abbott districts, and those are court-mandated funding that they receive, and we don't have those privileges. So we met with Linda Greenstein. I mean, she's aware of these issues. The legislators are aware of these issues, but unfortunately, the school funding formula is so arcane that nobody can understand how to even begin to untangle it to help us. But I guess my point is that the people who were able to arrange for the funding that they have was through a class action suit. So are you advocating that we bring a class action suit against the state and sue for more funding? Where do you start?
I made that motion 3 months ago to look into filing a lawsuit against the New Jersey State Department of Education for our fair share.
But
To
where,
my knowledge,
is
that's
that
what
something
they're
the
working on.
board does or that the parents do? Like, where do we go from here?
Dr. Hamilton and I met with David Sciarra from the Educational Law Center and our attorney, Vi Lordy, who was here earlier, and a representative from an organization called Save Our Schools.
Yes.
And we're looking at possibly a lawsuit. It seems from first blush that may be cost prohibitive for a district to enter into a lawsuit by ourselves or even in some kind of arrangement with other districts sharing the cost. But what was the focus of the recommendation from David Sciarra and also Save Our Schools was for the district residents to aggregate their voices and argue for a full funding of the state's funding formula. Right now, they have in place a funding formula which should satisfy all the needs of all the schools, but it's not funded anywhere to its capacity. And because of that, our state aid is consequently reduced. If the state was to fully fund and commit resources to fund the funding formula, we wouldn't have this problem.
They're saying that they can't afford it, though. I mean, isn't that the case? So we're sort of at a catch-22
Just like with our
here.
budget, it's a matter of priorities, and
Understood.
education should be the paramount responsibility.
True, but in lieu of that, you know, I mean, the reality of the situation is that they're not funding the formula, and it doesn't look like they're going to be funding it anytime soon. So, you know, we can send letters until we're blue in the face, but I don't think they're really being received or paid any attention to in Trenton. I mean, it's wonderful that people are doing that, but I guess what I'm really looking for is what can we do that's going to have some sort of an effect?
If I may, I just want to add something.
If it's brief, Mr. Klein.
Very brief.
Thank you.
David Sciarra is the head of the Newark Law Center who brought the lawsuits, the Abbott versus Burke lawsuit, which started the Abbott districts.
Yes.
And then he filed suit to get more money for the Abbott districts. So when the governor made that big cut when he first got in, they sued
Yes.
to get their money back. And instead of the Supreme Court doing the proper thing, was either reinstate everybody's, they only reinstated for the 31 districts.
Right.
And we're left hanging out to dry.
Well, yeah, we're not urban districts, so we're completely excluded from that lawsuit.
And I think we just, honestly, I think we just need to live with what we have and do with what we, I mean, we complain and we can complain and we could write letters and we can do all these things, but the bottom line is we have what we have and and I think we have to deal with it. In my mind, if we're gonna spend millions of dollars to have a lawsuit to get more funding, I'd rather just reinstitute busing and save the money and let the lawyers eat a little less. That's my
understood.
opinion. But, but I thank you for, if you have anything else, we'd be happy to.
Well, no, I guess just I keep coming back to we're still at cross purposes though, because we're still going to be underfunded next year. So we keep saying we're talking about busing now. We're going to be under the same budgeting constraints for next year, if not worse. I'm not optimistic that it's going to be better. So you're going to still be in the position where you're going to have to keep cutting and cutting. I'm sorry, I know I'm over, but I just don't want to keep having this. I don't want to keep having this conversation over and over again. So at some point, the funding is going to need to be addressed. So I'm not saying that you should sue if that's not cost effective for us, but I guess as parents, it's frustrating. It's very frustrating to see the board constantly put in this position.
Long and short, I assure you, we are very actively engaged in this, and I think, as Mike alluded to, our most presumed effective course of action is to really get the state to fully fund the existing formula. And the way to make that happen is to voice your concerns to the people who you elect, who sit at those tables and make those decisions. Mm-hmm. That is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. Yes, we're underfunded, and yes, it's inequitable, and we can have those philosophical debates.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, if the state fully funds the formula, Monroe would receive approximately $5 million if they just fully funded the existing formula. The argument has been that there is a proposal to change the state funding formula because the current formula is flawed.
Yes.
But if you haven't fully funded the formula, you don't know whether or not it works or not. So fully funded first, see where the parity is, and then if it doesn't work, then let's come together and talk about what a stable, logical school funding formula will be that serves the needs of kids all across the state, not just in certain pockets of the state.
I see. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Shel Arminio, 9 Nathaniel Street. First, have you finished your closed session? Are things resolved? Were they resolved and voted? No?
No, ma'am.
So they cannot be discussed yet?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Getting feedback. Okay, number one, a while ago, we were talking about people, union members opting out of some of the health benefits. How many people have done that?
The most recent analysis that we did was about a month ago, and there were 60 employees who had opted out. But keep in mind, I'm not sure if you're going there with this yet, but those opt-outs were already projected with the settlement of the union.
But you had predicted 128 members would opt out.
No, I believe we were estimating 75.
I think it was over 100.
I was the chairman of the negotiating committee with 75.
You know, we might have said we hope it gets to that number.
I think you said that you were hoping that the potential that it could have been 128.
I'm sure you're correct.
Thank you. Mr. Leary forgets who pays taxes. Okay, second, the general fund, that is a taxpayer-funded fund, isn't it? Don't taxpayers put their money into the general fund?
84% of it.
Okay, 84% of it. So when you talk about it not costing anything because it's coming out of the general fund, that's not really accurate. When you were talking
In what
about
context? The
you were
loan?
talking about the loan, right? And the
Yeah, the loan is not costing anything if it's repaid, and we have every
if it's repaid, are we getting interest on it?
No, because it's an interfund loan, it's not required.
So there's no interest, so it's just a pure loan to put this in place, and what are the projections of how long it's going to take for that loan to be repaid?
2 years.
So we're not going to make any money on it.
Not initially, like any new business venture, there's time for it to get up to speed.
Well, is it a business venture? Is it supposed to be
This
a
is-
profit-making?
This is most certainly a business venture, it's a for-profit fund, And we are very confident that once the image of our program gets out to the public and they understand how good of a service that we can provide, that the attendance will actualize what we're,
But when you're talking about the public, you're talking about the teacher's public.
staff, yes.
Teacher as the, so we're doing this, okay. But the general fund, money from the general fund is a taxpayer funded for 84%.
It is.
Yeah, so please don't say that it's not from taxpayers. Okay.
Let me just clarify.
Please.
It's a loan from taxpayers, 84% surplus in the general fund.
Now, do we bond for that, or is that coming out, we're actually giving them funds that are there?
We're giving them funds that exist there.
Okay, so we couldn't use those funds for anything else? Like all the things that have been taken away?
No, there's excess surplus calculations and required fund balance. This is all incorporated into there for this loan.
Okay. Third, I think the young lady who was asking about some of the salary reimbursements, there are administrators, is that not correct, who in their salary, in their contracts, do have allowances or reimbursements for car and travel and for clothing allowance?
That's absolutely false with regard to clothing allowance. And the only way an administrator would get reimbursed for meals and travel would be if it's board approved for a specific event in advance, delineating the professional development venture that they were going
Okay,
to.
so
engage in.
if we get a contract from one of the administrators and there's no additional funds other than what they're being paid as a salary, there's nothing else built in that?
No.
Okay, somehow I
Definitely
have to
no clothes for anybody other than the maintenance staff to protect them with safety wear.
Fine, that works. We keep talking about the Abbott districts and funding. Let me talk about districts who spend less for their students per student and get higher scores. I think there are municipalities and school districts in New Jersey who pay less for their students without getting funded from the state, and their scores and the accomplishments of the kids are much better. I would like to start talking about that. We are paying, approximately $16,000 a student in the high school? We should really have exceptional scores and quality of education. I don't care where the money's coming from. That's a lot of money to be spent per student. So that's the stuff we should be talking about instead of arguing about where the money's coming from. We're spending a significant amount of money per student. The students should be getting optimum scores, period. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Then, seeing none, I get a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Well, anxious?
Lou Masters and Amy Antelis.
Didn't you go first?
No, give it to Lou.
The next scheduled public Board of Education meeting, Wednesday.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
that's changing.
I'm sorry. Point of order. We need a motion for the goal-setting meeting on August 25th, if that time will work for everyone. August 25th, Saturday, from 8 to noon.
I think we already closed the meeting.
I know, we closed the meeting. That's why I said point of order.
What time is that going to be, please?
8 a.m. to noon on a Saturday morning.
You're out of order.
I'm out of order.
It was in confidential.
I know, I saw it.
District goals.
Double check.
Yeah.
I may be
Yeah,
busy.
yeah.
It's on my calendar.
I may be busy. I'll be outside watching the sun.
And point of order,
Watch it come up. Watch it come down.
adjournment is a privileged motion. Nothing comes before.
Yes, this is true.
We do have an opportunity to call a special meeting for that.
Okay, very well.
You know what?
That's
Yes.
it, meeting adjourned. Thanks, Kathy. Have a good night.
That was my fault. I should have reminded you.
soon. Bye.
Good night.